can't tell you, it's such an honor to be here. It's really, really cool. Because I was in your seat not long ago. Just to get some perspective, I want to get an idea of what majors you guys, right? Mostly business majors in here, or?
Yes.
Mostly, okay, so finance, communication, accounting, all the above. Really interesting. So, I remember sitting in your seat, and the constant theme that everybody was telling me when I was your age was, oh, you know, you're going to go into the real world now. And there was just like this theme of like trying to scare me. I don't know what it was, and it worked. It scared the hell out of me. And I remember walking in my first big boy job. And this is kind of an off-the-cuff story, but I want to tell you kind of the truth of how it is, at least my experience. And I remember walking my first big boy job. It was this big real estate investment firm in Philadelphia. And I walked in, and I was so scared because, you know, my aunts and uncles at family parties said, oh, you're going to the real world now. You know, are you ready? You know, responsibility and all these big terms I never really wanted to face. And so I was really intimidated. I walked in the first day, and I remember half hour early, I had my suit on, I had my tie on, I had my briefcase. I sat down at my desk, and I'm starting to work. And before I know it, probably a couple hours into it, this door slams open behind me. Oh, what the hell is that? It's the owner of the company, and he walks out, and he's pissed off about something. He's like, oh man, this is the real world, you know, oh boy. So, sitting there at my desk, and then all of a sudden he walks into the kitchen, and he opens up the microwave. I can hear it. And he comes out and he says, whose oatmeal is in the microwave? And he's really pissed off. And I wasn't thinking, then all of a sudden, oh shit, that's my oatmeal. I'm in trouble. I'm gonna make my first mistake in the real world. And I got so scared, I didn't answer. I don't know why I didn't answer, but I couldn't. I literally couldn't say the answer. So then he asked again, whose oatmeal is in the microwave? And again, I didn't answer. So at this point, I'm pretty much lying. You know, I'm not speaking up. And then he says to me something I will never forget. And I'm sorry for this, so excuse my language. We're in the East Coast, and this is the way a lot of people on the East Coast talk. He's like, if you don't come and get your oatmeal out of the microwave right now, I'm going to stick my penis in it. And I'm like, what the hell? You know, what? You know, and I'm sorry. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is the real world that you're talking. So anyway, I'm like, no, what do I do now? Well, please don't do that. So long story short, I walk up and I say, you know, I'm really sorry, sir. And he's like, oh, you know, I'm just kidding with you. I just wanted to scare the hell out of you. And I'm like, well, it worked. So anyway, the real world's not scary. It's anything but. You know, even if there's a real world, it's anything but scary. It's weird, just like that story. There's a lot of weird things that happen. But it's actually really cool. So I want to thank you again for allowing me to come in here and speak. And I want to kind of share with you some of the stories I have from this cool real world. And hopefully you can take advantage of some of the opportunities I took advantage of. And maybe learn from a lot of the mistakes that I've made. So when I was thinking about what to say to you guys, I thought that in order for me to kind of tell you where I've gotten to, I have to tell you kind of where I came from. And I work in finance right now, and I've been working in finance for probably the last 10 years. And I can tell you that probably my financial career actually started when I was 11 years old. It was really interesting. When I was 11, I grew up in a house, and I was raised by a single mother, and we didn't have any money. And my mom did a great job at raising me. I didn't want for anything, but I kind of knew we had some financial trouble. But she gave me a gift, which was she sheltered me from all of those problems. Until one day when I was 11, I was sitting in my living room with my mom, and the phone rang. And I could tell by the way my mom was talking that it wasn't good news on the other line. And she went back into her room, and she was very transparent traditionally with her conversation, so it made me curious as to why she was going away to have this conversation. And I go up, I'm really curious when I was 11, and I put my ear to the door, and I start to realize something. She was on the phone with the landlord, and the landlord was telling her that we were going to get kicked out, we're going to get evicted from our apartment in just a couple weeks because my mom couldn't pay the bills. And I kind of pushed the door open a little bit, and I saw my mom sitting there, and she was crying. And she didn't know that I saw her, but that obviously made me very upset. And I can tell you that today, that is the most important day that has ever happened to me. That changed my life forever. Because I got an emotional reason. I got a purpose to do something. For some reason, it just meant to me, okay, my mom can't pay the bills, what does this mean? I have to help her. I'm 11, what the hell am I going to do? Well, I'll go out and get a job, and I'm going to read every finance book that I can. I'm going to read every business book that I can. I'm going to learn how to make this work. And that's what I did. So I went to the local library, picked up a bunch of books, and I went out and I got a job the next week. And I kept on working. So kind of along this way, from reading finance and reading about business, I sort of through osmosis, I had this goal. I wanted to make it to Wall Street. And I didn't even know what that meant. I wanted to own my own business, and I wanted to make it to Wall Street. And the only reason I wanted that is because that's what the books were saying. That was the epitome of the financial career, was Wall Street. So long story short, I kind of advanced through high school, and eventually I got disinterested in school. Because I started working, and I opened up my own business, just a small little landscaping business with my buddy when I was in high school. And I started to realize that school was getting in the way of the next dollar that was coming in. So I became increasingly disinterested in school. And I remember specifically, I started to build up my argument to how I was going to stand up to my mom, which she did not do in my house. My mom worked a lot, so you did not want to stand up to her because she had very little time to reprimand, so she made it really powerful when she did. I remember literally going in my room and practicing the speech that I was going to tell her of how I'm not going to go to college. I made the decision as a man that I'm not going to go to college. So I remember this. The conversation finally came up, and she says, okay, Wesley, where do you want to go to college? I was a junior in high school. And I remember I kind of took a step back, and I stood up, and I said, Mom, I'm not going to college. I made this decision as a man, and probably my voice probably squeaked at the same time. And she says, huh, that's interesting. I said, okay. So I'm thinking it's kind of working. And then she stands up, and she's only like 4 foot nothing, and but just equally as intimidating as any military leader I've ever read about. And she says, I'll make a deal with you. You're going to college, period. And it's amazing how much preparation I put into that moment and how quickly it all collapsed. And I said, fine, I'll go to college. But the way that I kind of rebelled against her lesson was I only applied to one college. I figured, okay, I'll give it a shot. And if I don't get in, I can at least say I tried. And then if I don't get in, I can go work. I chose to go to Drexel University. I ended up getting in. The reason I chose Drexel, and it's a very well-known school on the East Coast for finance and engineering, you would essentially work for 6 months and you go to school for 6 months. So that was kind of my solution because it was the best of both worlds. I can concentrate on working and I can satisfy my mom just by going to school every once in a while. And before I knew it, I started thinking about how I was going to take the opportunity when I was in school. And luckily, good fortune kind of had it. I ran into a mentor probably a couple months before I went to college. And I talked to him a few weeks before my first day. And he said to me, he's like, listen, you're about to go into a university, you're going to learn. He's like, but I will tell you, he owned a company, a very successful company, on the Philadelphia Stock Exchange at the time. And he said, your academic training is one thing, but it's just a small portion of what you actually have to produce. He said, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to go in on the first day, I want you to apply for an internship. I don't want you to stop working until the day you graduate with internships. And luckily, he just hit me with that advice just at the right time. I don't know why, but I took it. And by the second week when I was at Drexel, I had my first internship. And then I ended up going through the program I had. I think I had 9 by the time I graduated. And it was a really cool experience, but I can tell you that my college experience was just like a whirlwind. I didn't even know what happened because I was kind of working so hard and just trying to make my mom proud. And I still had this goal of getting to Wall Street. And then one day I get a call and they say, somebody says, it was one of my mentors, and they say, we'd like you to come in for an interview with the company that I'm working for. I said, okay, great. And I go through all this and I'm not even realizing what's going on. And before I know it, I'm in New York City on the first day of my new job. And again, I wasn't very cognizant to what was occurring. And I walk into the lunchroom on the first day, and I'm eating lunch, and I'm by myself. I didn't have any friends at that point. And all of the walls are glass. And I look outside just kind of by chance, and I see the Statue of Liberty. And I'm like, for some reason, it just hit me at that moment that the goal that I had set when I was 12 years old, that I was on Wall Street. And it was a really overwhelming experience. I actually almost cried. I mean, it sounded like a but I almost cried. But then I thought, I was like, oh, shit, I can't cry on the first day of the job. I was crying in the lunchroom. So then I kind of took a step back and I thought, and I was like, wow, had I not gotten that advice when I was 18 years old to work and do internships and get as much experience as you can, had I not got that, there's no way I would have been here today. And it was a really cool experience. So I kind of like to share with you some of the things along the way that it kind of took me to get there. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter what your goal is, especially with your career, it doesn't matter. But here I kind of deconstructed the things that it took me to get there, and there's actually only a few things. So the first thing I would like to share with you is you're about to go on your career. I think pretty much all of you, if not all, are going to graduate relatively soon. The first thing I'd like to share with you is have a purpose. Find your purpose. You have to have meaning. There has to be emotion behind what you're doing. Because a lot of the business world today is too mechanical, and the ones who make it are emotionally driven for things. I'm telling you, that day when I found my mom on the phone with the landlord telling us that we're going to get kicked out, that is when I got purpose. Because I can tell you, it sucks going on interviews. I know from experience, it's the worst thing in the world. But if you haven't had a lot of experience going on interviews, it's awful the first couple of times you do it. But when you have emotion, when you have reasons to do something, you can get through it. Because the pain of going through those steps is nothing in comparison to the pain it took for me to go to my family and say I failed. So always have that emotional purpose. I'm telling you, it sounds corny, but it's absolutely true. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter what your GPA is. It doesn't matter what your background is. I'm telling you. Again, I know it sounds really corny, but it's absolutely true. I have a friend, I don't know if you guys know who Goldman Sachs is. Goldman Sachs is probably the top financial firm today. And this guy was a complete mess. I mean, he drank every day, partied every day. His GPA was almost in the negatives at that point. And he got a job at Goldman Sachs because he had an emotional reason. He went into his interview, and he got his interview pretty much by emotion. He told an emotional story, and he got the job. And that, for those of you in finance, that's like impossible. I mean, borderline impossible. You have to graduate from Harvard, have 4.0, blah, blah, blah. And he didn't, but he had an emotional reason. So that's the first thing. Have a purpose. Get emotionally charged. The second thing is find your hero. Another kind of corny story I'd like to share with you. I was turning 5 years old, and it was my birthday. And I remember waiting downstairs, and I just got. Does anybody know who RoboCop is? Yeah. I'm kind of dating myself, but RoboCop was awesome to me. I don't know why, but I freaking love RoboCop. My mom had given me one of my presents early. She gave me a RoboCop outfit the day before. So I'm waiting up. It's 5 a.m. in the morning, and I had my RoboCop outfit. I even got the gun, I got the vest, I got everything. And the reason I was up at that early in the morning was because my dad had called me a couple days before, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to show up for your birthday." And it was really cool. My mom and my dad were split up at that time, so it was awesome that he was going to show up because I hadn't seen him in a while. So I'm sitting there, 5:30 rolls by, 6 a.m. rolls by, 7 a.m. rolls by, and I'm sitting there, I'm still equally as enthusiastic. And then my mom walks down the steps, and she says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm waiting for Dad. I want to show him my robe." And I think I even pulled down like my RoboCop visor at that point just to put some emphasis on the story. And she doesn't say anything. And I didn't know what was going on. And she bends down and she starts to, she's trying to speak, but she couldn't. She started crying. And I said, "What's wrong?" And then before long, I understood what was going on. Dad wasn't going to show up for my birthday. He probably wasn't going to show up again. And I got upset and all of that stuff. But then something really cool happened to me a couple days later. A couple days later, I realized that, hey, I don't have a dad. I don't have a role model. So I have to go out and find one. So actually, it was a really great opportunity for me because if I wanted to learn how to play basketball, I had to go out and find somebody who was good at playing basketball and learn from them. So I had to go out and find my heroes. And actually, it's a really cool experience I have today. I actually work for one of my heroes that I met when I was 13 years old. So it's a really cool experience. So anyway, the reason that I'm telling you is I challenge you to go out and find your mentors, find your heroes. Because if there's anything you want to do, and this is absolutely 100% true, you can get there quicker by finding somebody who's already done it. And most people are willing to take you under their wing and show you how they did it. And you can get there so much faster. And especially the really cool part about it is when you encounter a hurdle, you can get through it much easier if you have a mentor who's already been through that hurdle. Because they can say, "Oh, don't worry about it. There's nothing to worry about. It's going to be easy." And you have no idea how powerful it is. And I can also tell you that your success in life and your career will be a direct correlation with the quality and quantity of your relationships. So find a mentor, find a hero, find somebody who you can follow. And the coolest part today is if you don't know anybody who you want to follow, the coolest part about today is that technology allows you to follow people who are ruling the world, who are running the world. You can follow Steve Jobs, not even alive today, but you can hang out with Steve Jobs essentially just by going on YouTube and finding some interviews with him. You can sit with Steve Jobs all day long. You can learn from the advice that he's given to millions of people. So it's really cool, and they say that you become only the 5 people you hang out with the most. So I'd ask you to look at who you're hanging out with and seeing if you want to be like them. And if the answer is you don't, you might want to reconsider who you're hanging out with. So find a hero. The next thing is get to the marketplace. Right now, everybody in this room, I don't know the exact situation, but we're in this microcosm right now in this room called college. And college is great. You can learn skills, you learn how to communicate, you can learn how to write, you can learn how to public speak, you can learn how to analyze and all this stuff. But the question of the day today when you go to apply for a job is not, can you do this? It's, have you done this? Essentially, they're asking for your experience. And here's one thing that I can definitely say. If you don't have experience yet, go out and get it. If you guys are going to graduate and you don't have an internship in your belt, trust me, please, if there's anything you can take from today, is go out and get some experience. Because employers will literally not look at you if you don't have experience. I worked for free for years to get that experience. So please, do the same. If you guys need help, I will give you my email address and I'll give you my phone number. Call me anytime, and it's not like a bullshit offer. Anytime. Because I would absolutely love to tell you. The reason is, because the advice that I received when I was 18 helped me tremendously. It changed my life just a couple degrees when I was that young, but just by changing it a couple degrees, it's amazing where you end up in comparison to where you would have been. So get involved in the marketplace. And here's what I mean. Go out, start a business, or go and apply for jobs, and go create value. Somewhere where money exchanges hands, because that is, quote, the real world. And it's not scary, but that's where you get judged. And you do get judged, and that's fine, but it's where you produce. And the coolest part about today is that just like, kind of like our grandparents, our great-grandparents, we don't have to go and work in a coal mine. We don't have to go and work in a paper mill. We don't have to do any of that stuff. Because of technology and the opportunities we have today in America, you can go out, if you like stickers, you can create stickers and go sell them online today. And that's crazy to think about. You can do whatever you want, really. And again, it's not to sound corny, but it's absolutely true. You can easily go start a business today if you wanted to. So go out and get your experience. And if you're not getting experience currently, please go out and do it. Trust me. If there's anything I get across today, it's that. Go out and get experience. Also, kind of along with that, and a lot of people probably disagree with this advice, I want to give you permission to dabble. Because a lot of people who have been in the workforce for a long time will say, you know what, oh, you got to graduate, you got to know what to do. The worst question in the world to me when I was your age, and I still agree with this, the worst question in the world is, well, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And you usually get that question like a family party or something from an uncle, and it puts you under a lot of pressure. And you want to be able to respond, oh, I want to be an accountant. And before long, you convince yourself you want to be an accountant, but you don't really want to be an accountant. I think a better question is, what do you want to do now? What is the value you can provide now? Don't worry about 45 years down the road. Your career is going to be extremely long. Our life expectancy for women right now is, I think, like 87 years old, and it's increasing by the day. Men, it's a little more of a sad story than 70-something, which is understandable. But don't get so concerned with that. What do you like to do now? And go dabble in it. Really. I mean, what is the risk in going out and trying a job and having that work out? Chances are you just go down the street and find another job. Yeah, it might take some numbers, but that's fine. Go out and dabble. Experience what you want to experience. Because here's what I want you to do. Do not build a resume. Build your skill set. Have the skill set translate to the resume. Because you cannot take your skill set away from you. Your resume you can kind of maneuver and everything and kind of have to be this facade. But at the end of the day, when you go into your interview and you don't have the skills that they're looking for, they will find out. So dabble. Go experience. Go get public speaking skills. Go get project management skills. Go get whatever skills you want to develop. And don't be afraid of it. So dabble. And go to the market. Create value in the marketplace. The last thing I want you to do, I want you to take all this advice. If you take any, it'll be great. But take this advice, and I want you to go out and I want you to fail. Just fail ridiculously. Fail to the point where you cry. Has anybody ever seen that Dane Cook skit where he talks about crying? Has anybody ever seen that? It's hilarious. And he talks about crying. When you get into these crying spells, you look in the mirror and you cry at yourself. You cry even more. I want you to do that. Fail to the point where you cry. And here's why. If you're not failing at least on a somewhat frequent basis, you're not taking enough risk. I can tell you that. That's absolutely true. And here's the other cool part about America. By the way, the probability that you're born in America is 4.5%. That you live in America is 4.5%. You've already hit the jackpot. There's no other place in the world where you can go and you can fail repeatedly and still land back on your feet. You will always have food and always have shelter if you choose. There's no other place in the world. So I want you to go out and I want you to fail. Because another reason why I want you to fail is that when you fail so hard, and once you've gone through that, yeah, it sucks at the moment, but nothing can really harm you after that. Because it now puts you in a perspective. I have failed ridiculously. My first job interview, I prepared for literally probably 2 months. And it was for this top financial firm. And I walk in, and I prepared for every technical aspect of finance that you could. I could tell you, CAPM formula, I could talk about different valuation techniques and blah, 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 all this stuff. And I drove myself crazy. And I walk in, I sit down, and they sit right across from me. And the first question was, what are your values? That's like the easiest freaking question in the world. And there are hundreds of answers, and they're all a bunch of crap. But still, you can answer anything. You can say, honesty, integrity, or I love serving people, blah, blah. You know what my answer was? It was this. Nothing. Nothing came out of my mouth. It's like I got up for the interview, and my brain friggin' went back out into the lobby and sat back down. I had no idea what to say. And they're like, well, what's your answer? And I literally said, by the time I could speak, I said, I don't know. You don't know? You don't know your own values? So anyway, go out and fail. And that was one of the best experiences I could have had because I felt so bad on that first interview that every other interview, I was like, I can't do as bad as that. So it was easy at that point. So that's kind of all this stuff jumbled in one. you don't actually get advice in life. You get opinions that are directed through somebody's life experience. So everything I'm telling you, I'm not saying that it's true. I'm saying that's what I experienced. I'd offer you to do the experiments and try it out and test it. Because it's worked for me, and I guarantee it could work for you, but test it yourself. So whenever somebody says they're giving you advice, they're really just giving you their opinion. So keep that in mind. Take what's useful and throw out the rest. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I want you guys, if you have questions, great. Ask me whatever you want. I'll tell you the truth. I hope you've gotten that impression. I'll tell you, whatever it is. And I really, really thank you for the opportunity in front of me. It's really cool. I hope you guys have this kind of experience when you graduate, because it's really beneficial. I mean, not just from your seat, but definitely from my seat. It helps me grow as a person. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to let me talk. So, thank you very much. So, if there are any questions, I don't care what it's about, let me know. But I know that Professor had one question kind of before I started when we talked on the phone, and that was how, basically around communication and trying to stress the importance of writing in the workplace. And I can definitely attest to that. I told her a story. Does anybody know who Jeff Bezos is? Jeff Bezos is the CEO of Amazon. He's the founder of Amazon. He's probably he's one of the richest men in the world right now. Very, very successful. Obviously, you guys know what Amazon is. And one of the key values that he has in the company is that whenever you bring an idea into Amazon for a meeting of the executives, or actually any meeting, the number one rule is you have to write out your thoughts completely. Because it forces you to take a step back and think through your ideas 100%. And I can tell you that from my experience, the majority of my communication, day to day at least, is done through email, done through written communication. And it's all about how do you communicate effectively and efficiently. And also, while we're on the topic of communication, I'm sure you guys already know this, but communication is only 7% words, so it's only 7% of what's coming out of your mouth. The rest is how you dress, how you behave, what your tonality is, all this stuff. So always keep that in mind. That communication, actually, I would actually say, I was recently talking to a partner of a big firm in New York, and I asked him, I was lucky enough that we went to lunch together, and I said, if you had to say the number one skill to get you where you got today, what would it be? And he didn't even hesitate, he said communication. He said, without a doubt. He said technical knowledge, technical ability, you can always acquire that. You get that through classes, you get that through coming through here. He said, but communication is done by repetition. And it's just a constant pitch and catch. Constant go back and forth and see how your words affect somebody, see how your presence affects somebody. And just being constantly cognizant of that. And it's true. And then I've since talked to a CFO and a CEO about the same topic, and they both said the same thing. I was actually amazed because I never heard that answer before. That communication is essential, and writing, without a doubt, is super, super important. So that's the first question. I'll throw that out for you guys. But feel free to ask me any questions about internships, about jobs, about experiences, about failures, whatever you got. If you have anything, let me know. I'm more than open. And don't be scared. Yes, sir.
So, you said you work in financing, right?
Yes, sir.
So, for just entry level, what kind of jobs can we expect for entry level college graduates for those entering finance?
Sure, great question. Okay, so finance is one of those really cool areas where it's so broad. And I would first answer your question by saying, consider where you are emotionally and where you naturally incline. So in finance, you can be on the relationship side, so you're pretty much where you're explaining, you're handling clients and all that stuff. So if that's your strong suit, then you might want to lean more towards there. But it goes all the way on the other end of the spectrum, where you can be sitting in front of a computer and doing math all day. And there's every variation in between. So I'd first tell you to kind of think about that, kind of figure out where you fit on that spectrum. And then, like I was saying before, dabble. So go out and try something. So for instance, I can speak to these experiences. There's investment banking, right? That's one kind of top job in finance. Investment banking is basically where you handle banking deals for companies. You can take the public, and there's a whole subset of tasks that are projects that fit within investment banking. But investment banking is very heavily relationship based and very heavily numbers based. And when you start out in investment banking, to answer your question, that entry level job, you're pretty much going to be making PowerPoints and doing spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff and learning the inner workings of that field. So you would start out more as like in an analytical role, and then you move up into a relationship role, essentially a sales position. And that's another thing I can say. Most jobs in finance where for lack of a better term, you make a lot of money, usually most of them end up in sales. It's where you go and you handle the relationships with the big companies, or you go and handle the relationships with the big investors. Because analysis is important, but it's really difficult to handle the relationship side. And then you can also go into, let's say you're more interested in more just numbers, and you like to trade or something like that, you become a trader. There are a lot of firms, and if you want to shoot me an email, I can easily kind of shoot you some names of firms that do that, and the other areas as well. But that's where you can be in front of a computer all day, and for your entry-level job, you just be filling orders, and you'd be, to be honest, you'd be getting coffee every once in a while. But that kind of phase kind of stops, pretty soon thereafter. And then there's also, there's financial reporting, which is numbers. So it really depends. If you have like any specific questions about that, that's kind of what you can expect. In terms of, salary, if you're looking for that kind of stuff too.
No,
Okay.
like just job description, like what can you expect for, if you're graduating, like what kind of job are you looking for?
Oh,
some
yeah.
people already have their degree and they're like, oh, I don't know what job I can get with this type of degree.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So the one thing, and obviously I'm a little biased, I work in finance. Finance is a great degree to have because it teaches you technical ability, but it also kind of teaches you how to think. And then it also gives you some background on the economy, so you kind of know how the world works to a certain extent. And then you also know how to think analytically, which is an incredible skill set to have. So if I'm graduating today, and for me, I'd go online, look for jobs, and you're going to be seeing jobs like that'll be posted from, let's say, a large corporation. They'll be for financial reporting, so you can go in, look at the finances of the company, and you do budgets and all that kind of stuff. Or you can go into trading, or you can go into investment banking, or you can go into handling personal investors' money, all of that kind of stuff. So those are probably the entry-level things. They can be really exciting depending on kind of your psychology, what you actually incline to. So if you have any more specific questions, shoot me an email. I'll give you guys my email and phone number later. But yeah, feel free to reach out. Okay, what else? I think, did you have a question?
Yeah, you said internships are really important, but I have a lot of volunteer work and not necessarily internships. Does that still correlate with volunteering and internships?
Oh, great question. Let me ask you, what's your name?
Juliet.
Juliet, nice to meet you. Let me ask you a question. So you're volunteering. What's your volunteer work like?
Well, I've done volunteer work for Banner and he was running for councilman. So
Okay, perfect.
we would go and just feed the homeless or, stuff like that. Collect
Sure.
cans, go carry on cans and stuff.
Right.
So,
And what is your major?
marketing.
Okay. And then do you want to go into a marketing position when you graduate?
Yeah.
Perfect. Here's what I would phrase, and here's why I was saying, build skills, not your resume, because you can easily build a resume, you can put it together. The skills is the important factor here. I would take that and I'd put it on my resume. And do you still communicate with the gentleman you were helping out?
Not him, but I still communicate with the lady that ran all of his stuff for him.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. And then what were you doing there? Were there business skills that you were kind of growing there? And I can easily help you out with this stuff too.
Sort of, because you kind of learn what his position was
Sure.
and how he had to gain people's trust and people's votes and stuff like that.
Yep.
So what he had to do, he had to always stand up in podiums and talk, and then with his money he had to kind of not really hire us, but tell us to help him pass out
Sure.
flyers, and he also had to go booth during the tech festival, and we
Yep.
had to kind of help him pass out stuff just so that he can gain votes from people.
Yep.
So that's
Yeah.
stuff that I learned.
Well, number one, awesome job on doing that, and absolutely that counts. Whether or not you get paid is completely irrelevant. Not once have I ever been asked on an interview, oh, you have this internship, how much did you make? Not once. And also similarly, I've never once been asked in an interview, oh, what classes did you take? What textbooks did you read? Not once. I've been on probably over 150 interviews, not once. So that experience, absolutely, put it down there as an internship. And if you need help with this, I can easily help you. You want 4 or 5 bullet points on saying the skills that you build. And obviously, gear them more towards marketing. Here's another thing about resumes, just as an FYI. I've been to many career fairs, talked to many people about editing my resume. It drove me freaking crazy when I was in college. Because I literally spent probably 300 hours on editing this one stupid document. And what I found was I would go to you and you'd say, oh, edit it this way. And then I'd go to you and you'd say, oh, I'm an expert and edit it this way. And I'd go to you and you'd say the same thing, go to you and say the same thing, and you'd say the same thing. So I edited my same document like 6 different times and he would edit his edits and so on. So don't get hung up on all that. Just get to a spot where you're comfortable and then go out. Because very rarely, very, very rarely, if you have the skill sets, as an employer going to look and say, oh, well, you know, I wish this bullet point was bullet point number 3 instead of number 2. You know, it's not going to happen. So don't get hung up on that stuff, but I can easily help you. Great question. What's next? Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
Erica.
Erica. And I'm sorry, sir. What was your name?
Carl.
Carl. Sorry, I didn't ask you that. Erica and Carl. And Julia.
Okay, I'm not on the topic of like financing, but
Sure.
I'm a business major and I'm probably going to minor in child development.
Awesome.
And currently I work at a daycare center.
Okay.
Do you think that would like correlate with like on my resume to like, put that on there?
Oh, yeah. And you want to go into child development?
Yeah.
Without a
open
doubt.
my own daycare.
Oh, really cool. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Absolutely. And here's a message that I learned a while ago. Do you really enjoy what you do?
Yeah, because it's a rewarding job. I really love it.
Yeah. So I would say take that, because that's that purpose that I was talking about, right? That's the meaning. Get immersed in it. And right now you're immersed in it. You're not just learning about it. So absolutely, being involved in child daycare, 100%. What I'd ask you to do when you're going through it is be cognizant of what's going on and turn that into a story. Because essentially when you guys go on interviews, here's what's going to happen. You will sell yourself based on your stories. Those bullet points are nothing. They're going to ask you, okay, what's your experience? And you have an opportunity there to say, hey, I worked for a daycare for 3 years, I've only been working there, and you wouldn't believe the stuff that had happened that made me grow. You know, little Billy bit Tommy in the face. You know, here's what I did about it. You know, so that kind of stuff is cool. And you think about it, when you're on an interview, you're in an interview with another human being. And all they want to confirm is that you actually have the experience that you're claiming to have on your resume. And when you can speak to it through a story, you'd be surprised about how far it can get you. Also, what I'd say is if you really have an interest in it, get immersed in the stuff, read books about it, go on blogs, watch videos, whatever your thing is, how you consume, go and consume it. Because that will give you even stronger stories. So, that answer your question?
Yeah, and do you think it could be kind of as an internship? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yep. And here's what I would say. Ask whoever you're working for more responsibility. Obviously don't know what responsibilities you have there now, but see if you can get more involved in their business structure. Just constantly look out for projects. Because I can tell you one thing, that often the experiences and the stories that I had in interviews were not exactly what I did that wasn't my prior job description, but they're because I took advantage of projects that just kind of come up. So, absolutely good. So for instance, the way that would look kind of for you is if, I don't know what you do, but let's say the owner of the daycare walks in and says, oh, you know what, I'm trying to figure out the budget for next year. You know, lend a hand and say, listen, and even if you don't know how to do a budget, it doesn't matter. You say, hey, I don't really know how to do a budget, but I'd love to help you however I can. And chances are she's going to say yes. If she says no, whatever, you can try the next project. But that'll give you another story. So try to get immersed in whatever you can get your hands on. And like I said, fail. And cry about it. And you'll be fine.
Thank you.
Yes, oh, no problem. Yes, sir, what's your name?
Chris,
Chris, what's up, man?
what if like your past work isn't necessarily applicable to what you're doing? Like before I used to run like a math tutoring program at a local elementary school, and I can't figure out how to connect that to like accounting internships I've been applying for.
Sure, absolutely. So number one, I'm going to disagree with you, Chris. Respectfully, of course. First thing is, I would challenge you. So let me make sure I have your story correct. So you math tutor?
Yeah.
And then trying to go into accounting?
Yeah.
Okay. I see that as 100% applicable. I mean, I think so number one, again, that's why I'm trying to put emphasis on building skills as opposed to building a resume. Because if you go in with the mindset of, I'm going to build my resume, then it kind of funnels you into thinking the way you're thinking right now. But I would ask you, what skills have you built? So let me ask you this, did you build leadership skills?
Yeah, I had to be in charge of a bunch of 10-year-olds.
Absolutely, right? Did you have to be organized?
Yeah.
Right? Did you have to know how to communicate effectively?
Yeah.
Right? Did you have to present?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 4 things right there, for bullet points. I won't even charge you for them. Go on right now. So absolutely, and here's the cool thing. Remember that emotion that I was telling you about? My first job, one of my first jobs, I worked at the stock exchange. And literally I called the guy, I had a buddy, his neighbor owned this company on the stock exchange. And I called him up and said, hey, listen, Greg, I want to work for your neighbor. And here's what I want you to do. I will buy you a steak dinner if you give me his phone number, and I'll call him and I won't even tell him where I got the number from. And he says, okay, fine. So so he did it. And I call him up and I say, hey, Mr. So-and-so, I've kind of admired you from the periphery, and I'd like to work for you. I'll work for free, and I don't really have any skill sets, but I have a bunch of time. And I can help you with whatever you need help with. And that was my sales pitch. Whereas you right now, you're saying, okay, you kind of want to transition from, where I was transitioning from zero to trying to go into the stock exchange, you're transitioning from, you have leadership skills. You have organizational skills, you have presenting skills. And then there's ambition in that too. I mean, how many of your peers led tutoring groups? None. Exactly, right? So automatically right there, you're different from the group. Here's another thing. When you apply, I want to stress that better, let me think how to explain this. Oftentimes, it's not the person who is better, that's not the person who gets the job, oftentimes. It's the person who stands out, the person who's different. That's why relationships work so well. Because let's just say you have this job and you have 300 resumes on here, but then Cynthia over here says, hey, well I know John, and John's a great guy. Chances are, for some reason, this is how our psychology works, we'll go and we'll hire John with it barely even looking at his resume. Why? Because John's different. He comes in through an avenue that we trust and all that stuff. So being different. Right there, you saying you've been a tutor and you can't even think of any of your peers. I mean, shit, I wasn't a tutor and I didn't know anybody that was a tutor. That's different. Automatically. And then again, if you need help with kind of putting that stuff together, reach out to me. But absolutely 100%. Just out of curiosity, when do you graduate?
Hopefully in like a year or two.
Okay, cool. Number one thing I would say to you, said your name was Chris, right?
Yeah.
Go out and get a freaking internship. And if you have to, especially, and I'm saying this especially to you because I know accounting. I hate accounting, respectfully, but I know accounting. So I love you for being able to do it because that means that I don't have to do it. Go out and get an internship. If you have to work for free, it doesn't matter. Work nights and weekends. I actually just helped somebody just 2 days ago. It was really cool. He gave me a call. He said, thanks so much, Wes, for just having a simple conversation with me because I got my job. He was out of a job for a year, and he had an engineering and business degree. A really smart guy. Out of a job for a year because he didn't have any internship experience. Because employers would say, well, what's your experience? He said, well, I worked at McDonald's for wherever the hell he worked. But I want to tell you what he did. Because he graduated, couldn't find a job, he eventually got a job as a security guard. And he worked Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, so that if an opportunity came up, he could use the week to get an internship, and even if he didn't get paid for it. So now that you're in school, do it. Trust me, I know it sounds, it kind of sucks to go, I have to go out and work, but here's the cool thing about internships, is they don't have to be full-time. And yeah, you might not get paid for them, but let's just say you act like it's a class. Spend Monday and Tuesday, a couple hours Monday, a couple hours Tuesday or Wednesday, going in and volunteering for a company, and having them solve some of their problems for them, or just sit there and let them throw projects at you. You'd be amazed because here's another thing they never asked me on my interviews. They never asked me for any of my interviews, well, how many hours a week did you work? Never. So I mean, some internships I worked full time when I was in school, but some internships were just Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Some internships were Monday, Tuesday. So be conscious of that. You can kind of make your schedule work. And I'm not familiar with how this university works, but can you pretty much kind of set your own kind of schedules? Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So at my university, we could sit, I basically loaded my classes all up on Tuesday and all up on Thursday. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday had completely open. So you can do something similar. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah.
100% you got the skills. Don't worry about it. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name's Steven.
I'm sorry, what is that?
Steven.
Steven, how are you?
Good, how are you?
What's going on? Good, thanks.
I'm just curious to hear more of your story, more details behind it. After school, did you get a majors in finance, or did you major in finance?
Sure.
I want to hear more about your internships, your experiences. I know you talked about the different spectrums of finance, how there's different ends. Or
Oh, yeah.
I want to hear what ends you work with, or if you work with all of them. I'm assuming.
Sure.
I want to hear about your jobs, how you met people to get different jobs. I don't know. I want to hear more.
Great question. That was a pretty boring story, but I want to hear it again, so I'll tell you.
And I want to hear yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to hear it all.
Yeah. Okay, so great question. The first thing was, number one, wherever you are, don't worry about it. If you have a .02 GPA, it doesn't matter. I started off, I went and applied for my first internship. I went to the university, and I went to their executive MBA program. And they had an accounting office there. It was just processing paperwork and all that kind of stuff. And I went in and said, hey, can I apply? And they said, yeah, sure, you got the job. Because I was one of the first ones there. It was just like the first week of freshman year. So that's how I got started. And that gave me my story. And I went through it in a very cognizant way. Plus I had a mentor, which was really, really helpful. So if you don't have a mentor, find one. And I'll give you guys my number. Feel free to contact me, ask me any questions you want. So that gave me my base. So then I went out there, and then I started applying after like 4 or 5 months of working at that place. I started applying, and here's the kind of the strategy that I used. The strategy that I used was not following, oh, you know what, pick what you want to do, and then just stick with it. Yeah, that can be effective, but the probability of you knowing what you want to do when you're 18, 19, 20, blah, blah, blah years old is so minimal. I mean, it really, really is. So go out there and experience. So then what I did is I said, okay, I want a little different experience in finance. So I went from that job, and then I went to work for a public company, actually in their marketing department. It was an interactive advertising agency, because I wanted to learn how to communicate. I wanted to learn just the ins and outs of that stuff. A super cool company. Did that, I did product management. I got product management skill. From there, and there's 1 or 2 in between there, but I forget right now. From there, that's when I went to the stock exchange. And I got that internship just by making that cold call and saying, hey, I don't know what the hell I can provide you, but shit, if you need me to go and get donuts every morning, I'll do it, you know. Which, by the way, I did that for a while. Actually, my first day on the job at the stock exchange, you know, I have a stool here. But you know, a stool, has anybody ever sat on a stool for hours? It's the worst thing in the world. There's no back to a stool. So they literally, there are booths in the stock exchange. They're kind of like this, actually. And everybody's in here working on their computers. And the owner comes and he takes a chair, and he comes and he puts it out here. It's like in the hallway, kind of the exchange. And where everybody's like running back and forth going crazy. And he puts me right there. He puts us, and he says, just sit there and wait for me. And he kind of, implicit in his message was, oh, I'll be back in like 5 minutes. 8 hours went by, and I'm sitting on this freaking stool, and I didn't know what to do. That was like my first, you know, my very first experience at the stock exchange. So it's not always glamorous, is what I'm trying to say. But then after a while, I kept on asking for responsibility. I kept on giving me more. Then my next move, where was it? It was to a real estate investment company, and I did analysis for them and a lot of Excel work. And
Are you meeting people along the way to these jobs, or are you just looking and applying?
oh yeah, great question. Thanks for bringing that up. Here's the other thing. The really cool part about being young is that people feel bad for you. You know? So you go and it's like, oh, gee, I kind of want to learn this, or I want to work here. And the cool thing about older people is that they want to help. You know, it's this really weird concept. So they would give you a job, you know, or give you an internship just based off of the fact that you told them the story. So share your stories. Another thing I did was I joined organizations. Join every organization that you can that you'd be interested in. Like I was saying, get immersed in what you want to do. So if you're involved in finance, there are finance organizations around here. There's the Chamber of Commerce. There's the Rotary Club. There's just Google, you know, Google finance organizations or Google marketing organizations, and get involved. Get involved in clubs. But I would really stress, get involved in organizations outside of college too, because those have the executives of the companies. Those have the managers of the companies. Those have owners of the companies. And you will, remember how I was saying about standing out and being different? If you walk out as, you know, a 24-year-old or a 19-year-old, however old you are, into some of these organizations that basically consist of like, you know, 50, 60, 45-year-old people who are very successful and involved in their careers, and you come out, just you being there is you standing out. And here's the next thing. All you have to do, even if you're shy as hell, all you have to do is, oh, you know, my name's Tim. You know, I'm looking for a job, I'm in college, and I'm really scared. You can even say that. Be transparent. Each internship list, but I'd like to work with you. Chances are that it'll actually work. It sounds crazy, but it'll work. So that's kind of along the way. And always build relationships. But here's the other thing. Don't be corny about it. There are a lot of, like, you know, networking events where you go and say, oh, my name's Wes. You know, what's your name? Here's my business card. Like, that's corny. Be real. You know, go and say, you know, hey, you know, my name's Steven. You know, and here's what I do. Here's what I do in college, and here's what I'm looking for. You know, I'd love to help you out however I can. Here's the thing. Always create value. Every situation you get into work, always. The number one question you want to ask, and this will be hard as hell sometimes, say, how can I create value in this situation? And it's really easy during the easy parts of the day, but when you hate your boss, it just sucks. You know, he yells at you. I've been yelled at many times. It sucks. And when he comes up to you and says, you know, get this report done, ask yourself, how can I create value? Because there's an opportunity there where you keep your mouth shut and say, okay, what can I do? What can I do to learn from this? And what can I do to create value for him? You do that enough times, you win anybody over. So in your job, always do that. And then so just to kind of compress the story, I dabbled a lot. And I would not have had it any other way, because when I went on internship, when I went on interviews, I could speak about investment banking, I could speak about hedge trading, I could speak about municipal bond trading, I could speak about consulting. Another cool aspect of finance, or about actually any major, is you can go into consulting. Like if you don't know what you kind of want to do, a great avenue to go through, this is what I did on Wall Street, was working for a consulting company. You basically go in on projects. So it's a really cool thing, because you can go in and you can do a project for a major company. It's only going to last a couple months, and it gives you experience with this. And then the next 4 months, you go and get experience with this over here, and you meet a ton of people from all over the world, depending on what consulting firm you go for. So if anybody's kind of like in that in between period and kind of considering what they want to do, I strongly urge you to consider consulting. It's a lot of hours, again, depending on what firm you go for, but it gives you that kind of diverse skill set and experience. And it's awesome. And the cool thing about it is that when you come out on the other side, you can apply to pretty much anywhere you want. Because your stories at that point are amazing. It's, I worked in China, I worked in blah, 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 I worked for such and such client. Because then you can start kind of name dropping different companies that you've worked with. And that's a very powerful story. Whereas one person, if you go into work for a company, which is obviously fine, if you go into consulting, you can say all these companies you work for, whereas if you just work with one company, you can only use their name. If that makes sense. So, always build relationships, dabble as much as possible, and if you need help on more specifics, reach out to me, I'd be happy to help you.
I feel like you use a lot of things you learn in school in your jobs.
Great question. Professor, are you listening?
Yeah, I was going to say, do I need to cover my ears?
It depends what you mean. So I would say I learned certain fundamental skills. The knowledge, I'll be honest with you, the majority of at least my academic training in terms of the content was not used. Even the finance training to a certain extent was not used, because the world is changing at such a fast pace, which is why I'm telling you guys to get out into the workforce right now, because just by its very definition, well, by the way, the coolest part you guys have about this particular class is that your professor works in the real world every single day, so she can kind of ingratiate what's changing in the marketplace at the same time. So she knows what she's talking about. It's not just some professor who's been here for 40 years and is teaching from a textbook that's 40 years old. But to answer your question, yes and no. I learned skill sets of, how to work with people, how to manage a schedule, which I'm still not good at today, by the way. And just kind of like be comfortable with being uncomfortable, if that makes sense. But direct content, I'd be lying to you if I say, oh yeah, my marketing book 321, that's your good job. Yes, sir.
Did you find your internships through the school, or did you go out and find them on your own mainly?
Great question. The answer is a hybrid. There's a hybrid of the two. So I told you the story about how I cold call, which actually, by the way, cold calling sucks. I know that, and that's why it works. Because 98% of people are not willing to do it. So if you think about it, we actually just had a position open in our office, and it was for like an office manager position. Day one, we got 300 resumes. 300. There's no way in the world we can go through 300 resumes and try to find someone. So we literally picked freaking top 20, just by grabbing it and then reading through them. But that's so much different than if you cold call somebody. Or, here's even better, and here's what sucks even more, you walk in their office. I've done that before too, and that's also very effective. I've also had that work not so well before as well. But be different. And here's one thing I can say. If you have a relationship, start there. So let's say you're looking for experience. Let everybody know your story. Get together a little story. Hey, my name is John. I'm sorry, what was your name?
Isaiah.
Isaiah? Sorry about that, man. Get together your story. Hey, my name's Isaiah. I'm such and such years old. I'm looking for a job here. My skill sets, and here's what I can offer. And again, don't be worried if you don't have any skills, which is not true. I guarantee you have skills. But I didn't have anything to offer except for my time for for the job on the stock exchange. So work your relationships. Let them know what you're looking for. And then also what you can do is, what's your major?
Finance as well.
Oh, cool. Really cool. Do you have an idea, what's your preference? Do you like big companies, small companies?
Companies.
What is that?
Small companies.
Oh, awesome. That's even better. if you're up for it, definitely give me a call or send me an email. I'd love to help you out because small companies is great. There are freaking bajillion finance companies out there, and a lot of them are really small. One person, people, a couple people in the office. But the really cool part about it is they're very approachable. You can go in and you can even Google finance companies. Do you have an idea of what area of finance you're interested in?
No, not yet.
Okay, cool. And I can help kind of navigate through that if you want. Basically, what we would do is first you'd work through your relationships, let them know, and you'd be surprised. Oh, I didn't know Uncle Bill owns, a bank, whatever it is. You'd be surprised when we kind of come through that, and then also be different. So look up a list and be bold. Be bold and be different. Look up a list of finance companies in the surrounding area and just start cold calling them, or even walk in because it makes them really uncomfortable and they talk to you like when you put them in that position. And again, you're young, so take advantage of it. They feel bad. So I know it's uncomfortable, but whatever. So that's kind of how it works. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And yes, sir.
Travel a lot?
Do I travel a lot? I did. I used to travel I would go, kind of really interesting, I would commute from Philadelphia to New York, which is a 2.5-hour commute on certain days. And other days I fly from Philadelphia to Toronto, to Mississauga, to Ottawa, and then back. So that was on Monday, and then come back on Thursday, and then on Friday I go to New York. So it was kind of like this whirlwind. And in consulting, that's a pretty that's very common. But I loved it. I love traveling. You get to experience new things. And the really cool thing about traveling is the company pays for everything. Yeah. So it, and a funny story about that. When I was on my last project, they would pay like $75 a day for food. Who the hell's spending $75 a day on food? I don't know. But anyway, I like money personally. If you haven't gotten through my stories, so I was like, all right, I'm gonna save as much money as possible. I'm gonna keep that $75 a day. I'm not going out and eating at bougie restaurants and all that crap. So I put in my travel case 30 cans of tuna and 15 cans of beans. And I'm like wheeling my travel case, like the wheels are breaking, right, because it's so freaking heavy. And and I put it onto the security belt at the airport, and they just look at me when it goes through. They're like, you got like 75 pounds of metal and liquid in your bag. I was like, I thought I could get past you guys. So don't do that. But yeah, traveling is, I love traveling. If it's not for you, it can get pretty taxing. But it's amazing. You get to experience different countries, different areas, and so on. So yeah. Any other questions around travel?
No, but can I hear about like now, like a day in your shoes now? What are you doing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So great question. Right now, I kind of mentioned in the story, I work for one of my childhood heroes, actually. It's really, really weird. I handle investments for clients, for larger clients, guys who own companies, and so on. My day-to-day, I travel to clients, different companies during the day, but it's all around Southern Hardin County. And then also clients come in for meetings, and they essentially invest their money. So part of my day is analysis, so working in Excel, looking at different investments, analyzing, and then responding to client calls and all that kind of stuff. And then another part is more geared towards going out and doing presentations or answering questions, if that makes sense. So I personally love my job. I love it. It's so diverse, and it fits like exactly what I want to do. So if it's something you're interested in, I can kind of help navigate kind of, if you want to explore that thought. So yeah, really cool because I'm a geek, so I can do the number side of it, and then I also like dealing with people, so I can do that side as well. So it's almost 50-50. It's cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
It is a very technological world. So what I did was for my company that I wanted to internship at,
Yep.
I couldn't really find how to contact them, so I contacted them through Facebook.
Okay.
Would that be a good way to ask them for an internship, or do you still prefer calling them and going to their company and just talking to them?
Sure, great question. Let me ask you this. What is more uncomfortable for you, just personally? Don't think about anybody else. What is more uncomfortable for you, sending a message on Facebook or walking into somebody's office and saying, hey, hi? Exactly. And life is really funny because usually the things that are most uncomfortable are the most effective. And it makes sense, right? Because 98% of the people who want that internship will not do that. 99% of the people will certainly send a message on Facebook because it's comfortable. Because you can get rejected and not really feel it. So I, unfortunately, I'd say embrace the discomfort and go in and ask. You know, and here's the other thing, you'll get turned down. I guarantee you. But here's the other thing, you do it enough times and you'll find something. And it'll be so worth it, so worth it. So,
Yeah,
cool.
because I mean, they did give me their phone numbers, like, to call them
Oh, absolutely
during the
cool.
internship time, so.
Absolutely cool.
Call.
Trust me, if there's one thing, I mean, I felt bad for employers around Philadelphia when I was in college because I would, you know, again, I was using the pain, I was doing it for an emotional reason. My family needed me to make money and needed me to become, you know, somewhat of a success in that, whatever definition you have for that. So, yeah, it sucked going in and talking to Mr. So-and-so, you know, CEO of X, Y, and Z company, but it was nothing in comparison to not being able to provide for my family, if that makes sense. And literally, I've done it hundreds of times. Only one time, it was at the stockbrokers that I was working for. Only one time did somebody call me down and said, you know, they called me on the office when I was actually working in the company and I wanted to apply for another position. And the position that was open was for somebody who was in like their mid-30s. And I was like 23 at the time. And you know, so I sent my resume in with confidence, you know, because if you're going to fail, you do it with confidence. And they called me and they said, hey, can you come down to the executive blah, blah, blah room? I said, oh, sure. And they sit me down, and pretty much like, you know, these guys are really super smart, and they were so like distraught with me that the only thing they could say was, dude, you gotta relax. You know, because every morning I'd get there like at 5:30 in the morning, and I'd walk and I'd wait out in front of the executive's office to talk to him. And he'd ignore me all the time, you know. But that was only one situation out of hundreds. And to be honest with you, I'm painting a grim picture of saying, yeah, it's really uncomfortable. It's not as bad as I'm painting. I just want to kind of adjust your perception of, because then when you go into it and you actually do it, it's not that bad. Only one time out of the last 10 years has that ever happened where they say, you gotta chill out. And chances are, if, you know, to be honest, from my perspective, if they are going to have that kind of philosophy where it's like, hey, you're applying for a job that you shouldn't be applying for, then I don't want to work for you anyway. Because then you're not basing it off of performance, you're basing it off of age, which is silly to me. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool, yeah, no problem. Anything else?
I have one I'd like to add. So you've been talking about mentors and having the boss tell you to kind of calm down. At what point do you know kind of you need to step back from finding a mentor? What ways can students go about finding mentors? Because I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, some of you might feel kind of daunted at the task of like, how do I find a mentor? How do I approach that individual?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Great question. Okay, so the number one thing is use common sense. And I know it sounds like an overly simplistic answer, but if you want something and you're not putting in the effort, like I'm gonna call you every freaking day, so you give me the silver bullet answer. Chances are you're gonna hate me in like 3 days, right? But, so don't do that. Don't overwhelm somebody's inbox or, you know, so the stories I'm telling you, you know, they're some of the stories that are funny. But the way I handle my mentor relationships, basically, I use a rule. And the rule is, I take 5 steps, and I ask them to take a half a step. So they can see me putting in all this effort. So when I contact them or on the phone, or I contact them through email, I say, you know, hey, here's the progress that I made. I applied to 50 jobs, I talked to 3 different executives, I went to 4 different lunches, and so on. And here's the little hiccup that I have. So he can see all of the effort that I'm putting in, he gets that enthusiasm out of me. And then I say, hey, you know what, Jim, if you could would you mind just calling this one guy for me because he won't pick up my phone calls. Is there any way you can connect me? So does that make sense? I put in all of this action, and then I ask him just to help me out a tiny bit. And it's just this constant push and pull. And then there's an emotional engagement. So when he can see me putting in the effort, and then he sees that his little effort helps me a lot, that kind of creates this cool like little success cycle. You kind of work out a relationship that way. And then obviously you have to use your judgment and kind of work out what works best for you guys. But to answer your question simply, make it known and be able to show, if I was following you around with a camera, what would I see? Would I see that you're putting in the effort? Because they'll find out eventually. And if I can see you're putting in the effort, I'd be more than happy to help you out. But if you're not taking any steps, it wouldn't make sense for me to take any steps. So that's kind of, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Cool. anything else? Cool, well, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure. Awesome.
All right.
Oh,
Do you want, I have a marker.
yeah.